Okay, so think about this. No forensic science, no modern police forces. Justice was often personal, right? How did the ancient world, Greece and Rome, actually manage crime and punishment back then? That's what we're diving into.
It really boils down to a fundamental power struggle. I mean, all the sources, they point towards this one central conflict.
Which is?
It's this fight, this constant push and pull to take justice out of the private sphere, the family, the household, the oikos, as the Greeks called it, and put squarely into the public domain, under the authority of the city-state, the polis. That shift, it defines so much of their legal evolution.
And looking at the sources, you get these incredible stories, don't you? From like plays and tragedies to actual court records. It shows the real social consequences, the messiness of trying to impose order when, well, tradition often screamed for vengeance.
Exactly. Let's start with Athens. You see this huge conceptual shift dramatized literally by playwrights like Aeschylus. He shows this necessary, painful move away from blood feuds where family honor demands revenge towards a formal state court making the call.
Like the Areopagus court.
Precisely, like the Areopagus. That move is all about asserting the city's authority over the individual family's desire for payback.
But even with a court verdict, the consequences didn't just stop there, did they?
Uh-huh.
You mentioned this idea of pollution, religious pollution. How did that actually work? Was it just social awkwardness or something more?
Oh, it was much more formal, even if the punishment wasn't strictly legal in our sense. If you were deemed an alaterios, someone polluted by having caused a death, you faced profound social exclusion.
So what does that look like?
Well, the sources describe this thing called the homorophius doctrine. Think about soldiers in the Democratic Army. They would universally refuse to share a roof, a tent, say, or even food or drink with someone accused of homicide.
Wow. So the whole community just shuns them.
Pretty much. It was this incredibly powerful community-wide rejection. It basically confirmed the person was outside the bounds of acceptable society. The state might not execute you, but the polis, the community itself, was effectively saying, we don't recognize you. Intense pressure.
Right, I can see that. And if that social shunning was so potent, it must have made any kind of political healing, like after a civil conflict, incredibly fragile.
Yeah.
That urge for private revenge must have constantly bubbled under the surface.
Absolutely. You see it plain as day in the historical context. Think about the struggle to maintain the amnesty of 403 BC after the 30 tyrants were overthrown in Athens. The law demanded reconciliation to stop the cycle of violence, but that deep-seated desire for personal vengeance, fueled by this fear of pollution and the need to shun, strained everything. It nearly broke the peace.
Okay, so Athens, very focused on status, religious purity, community reaction,
Yeah.
big social consequences. But Rome seems different, more procedural maybe. How did they approach it?
Yeah, Rome tackled it differently. Less focus on the religious pollution aspect, much more on procedure, administration. They made this really key distinction in their legal thinking
You're tr-
between written law, so statutes, acts passed by assemblies, where the actual words constituted the law, and unwritten law. Now, unwritten law wasn't just custom. It included things like a judge's detailed reasoning in a decision. That carried huge authority and substance, but the specific phrasing wasn't binding forever.
Interesting. So the exact text mattered for statutes, but interpretation and judicial reasoning were also crucial, just more flexible. How did they stop that flexibility becoming total chaos?
That's where the praetor's edicts came in. Each year, the praetor, a key magistrate, would issue an edict. These edicts essentially built up a body of law called the Silurus Honorarium.
Okay.
Think of it as, well, maybe like an equity system alongside the older, more rigid civil law, the Silurus Civil. The praetor could adapt, modify, even override the old rules to deal with new situations. It kept the law from getting stuck in the past, made it practical.
And it's fascinating how that focus on procedure could then be used to, well, lock in the social hierarchy. You gave the example of the action for insult, the ineria. Tell us about that.
Right. So, take a freedman, someone formerly enslaved, now free. Generally, he couldn't bring an action for simple insult against his former master, his patron. The law basically recognized the patron's ongoing social authority.
So your status directly limited your access to justice in that case.
Exactly. Unless the insult was deemed aggravated. That meant things like, say, the patron treating the freedman as if he were still a slave, or punishing him excessively. So even within this flexible, evolving system, the procedures were often designed to reinforce who had power.
So pulling it all together, ancient justice clearly wasn't just one thing. It was this constant battleground, wasn't it? between age-old traditions of vengeance, the realities of social status, and this newer ideal of public order imposed by the city-state.
Absolutely. And if you want the bigger picture, these ancient fights, who gets justice, what even counts as a crime, when does the state step in over the family, these are the foundational questions. They're the bedrock, really, of how we still think about law and order today.
So here's something to think about. Which system strikes you as potentially more effective long-term for keeping a society stable? Is it the Athenian way, with its focus on moral pollution and community shunning? Or the Roman approach, with its emphasis on formal procedure and the flexibility granted to magistrates? Something to chew on.